Laura, have we let everyone in?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Citizens Advisory Panel meeting of the Richmond Land Bank, which is a program of the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. This is our first meeting of 2022. And so really want to welcome all of you who have made the time to show up today. My name is Gwen Corley-Creighton, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of the Citizens Advisory Panel. And if you are not familiar with it, our purpose is really all about repurposing properties, especially those that have been abandoned, tax delinquent, rejuvenating those properties to repurposing those properties to rejuvenate the community. I'm a little tied-tongued this evening because I haven't been talking much. Plus, there's a level of excitement that I have based on our agenda today and the fact that so many of you have made the time to show up. One of the things that I want to do is take a moment just to go over our agenda for today if you have not seen it. We'll just briefly go through and accept our minutes from our November meeting. Staff will really give us an update as far as additional properties that have been conveyed to the land bank. And we'll also talk about some of the surplus property. And then most of our time today will be spent focusing on the JXN Project proposal. And many of you have probably heard about it. You'll have an opportunity to meet Dr. Sisha Moon and Ms. Anjali Moon, who are the visionaries of the JXN Project. And then typically what we do is after any presentation, we allow for community comments. That's really one of our values. Community input is a cornerstone of the work that we do. And so we'll have time for a public comment, and then the CAP members, and some of them you may not see right now, but at some point, all of them will be identified. We'll have our conversation, and then we'll end up with next steps. So that's pretty much the agenda that will follow for today. And one of the things that we have been doing, since oftentimes there are different people that show up for our meeting, and quite honestly, really want to commend the staff that works, that does all of the work for the land bank, HD advisors, because they have done a phenomenal job in really intentionally reaching out and engaging the community. And even though we've been in this pandemic mode, we probably have more community participation than we've ever had before. So do want to thank and applaud them for that. What I'd like to do is to just pull back for a minute, allow the staff to give an overview of what the land bank is about so that those of you who are not familiar with it may be introduced to it. And then after that, I'll come back for just a few minutes before we continue with the agenda. So I'm not sure if that's you, Julia. Okay.
Yeah, and I was hoping that Flora would be the slide mistress tonight, but if she's, oh, okay, she's here.
Yeah,
yes.
No, I'm here. Yeah, give me 1 second and I can.
Flora, I have it pulled up. Do you want me to just share my screen?
I got it. Hold on.
Okay. Awesome. So thanks everyone for being here, and thank you, Madam Chair, for our introduction and for your leadership. I'm Julia McNally with the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, Program Director of the Land Trust and the Land Bank, which, as we'll go through, is a program of the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. So we like to start our meetings with this little presentation, sort of a Land Bank 101, if you will, because we realize that land banks and land trusts may not be household names and definitions to everyone, and they can seem kind of similar in title, land bank and land trust, easy to mix up, but they do serve two separate but complementary functions. So the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, which many of you may have heard of at this point, is a program of permanently affordable home ownership. Community land trusts are models that are used throughout the country to preserve affordability and stability in neighborhoods in perpetuity. And they do this by using a ground lease. And the ground lease basically dictates the amount, the terms of resale. So rather than having a home on the market dictated by market forces, community land trusts enable homes that are sold as affordable to folks making low to moderate incomes to always stay affordable to folks making low to moderate incomes well into the future. So that's the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. We also serve as Richmond's regional land bank. So we also serve as the land bank in Chesterfield and Henrico, as well as in Richmond. And the purpose of a land bank is, as our chair described at the beginning of this meeting, to return vacant properties to productive uses for neighborhood benefit. So we can go on to the next slide. This is sort of what I was going through just now verbally with the Community Land Trust. And this is essentially just a quick infographic that shows how permanent affordability is maintained through the land trust model. Essentially, income qualified home buyers can purchase homes from the Community Land Trust, and the land trust retains ownership of the land and leases it to the buyer for a small yearly fee. And then when the homeowner goes to sell their home, they earn equity rather than based on market value of their home. They earn an equity that is in line with the average income change, the average change in income over the period of time where they lived in the home. So if they lived in the home for 10 years and over that period, there was an average annual increase of 2.5% in income in the region, the home would increase by that same amount as well. And the purpose for this is because the Community Land Trust model is meant to serve folks who are in the region, but not served by the housing market. And the idea is that home prices are outpacing incomes and wages. And so by tying the home price to the average income figures that are published each year by HUD, the Community Land Trust model enables our investments into affordable housing to remain in neighborhoods in perpetuity. And community land trust models are also used nationwide, not just for affordable home ownership, but for a way for the community to have control over land use decisions. Most community land trusts have home ownership representation on their board, and ours is no exception to that. And in fact, we have a third of our board positions occupied by homeowners in our program. Next slide. So what is a land bank? That's why we're all here tonight. A land bank can be a number of different, it can be structured a number of different ways. It can be a branch of a local government, or it can be an existing nonprofit or organization, such as the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust in this case, that can hold and transfer generally underutilized and vacant properties to final end users. So sometimes these properties come through the surplus list that a locality may have. Sometimes they've been abandoned and reclaimed by a locality. And sometimes they're taken off of the tax delinquent list, which generally brings properties to auction and are sold to the highest bidder. So there's a number of different ways land banks can get properties. And another power that land banks have is to determine the terms of their transfer. So the Richmond Land Bank has the goal of permanently affordable sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied too tonight. The Richmond Land Bank has a primary goal of permanently affordable and affordable housing throughout the Richmond region. So our mission is to provide a strategic, streamlined, and transparent method for repurposing these vacant and tax delinquent and surplus properties back into assets that address community needs and desires. And part of transparency is having meetings like this one, where the community gets to hear about what's happening and what properties we own, and even has a chance to comment and learn more about our process. As I said, our number one goal is to create affordable housing, especially permanently affordable housing, such as that through the CLT model that I described earlier. But we also have a number of other priorities, including green space, commercial uses, agriculture, and other uses depending on community needs. So the proposal that we'll be going over tonight, we'll see actually falls into these secondary priorities. But I think that it's a really important moment for us to consider the way that community resources and anchor institutions do contribute to overall neighborhood health. It's not just housing that matters when we're looking at, improving the housing stock and residential options for residents of Richmond. All right, next slide. So this is an overview, and this is also available on the Richmond Land Bank website for those of you who want to peruse, but this is an overview of the work that we've done so far. Land banks have only been legal in Virginia since 2017, and we have only been in operation ourselves since around 2019. That's when we had the first fully assembled meeting of our Citizens Advisory Panel. And since then, we have transferred a number of different properties to nonprofit developers throughout Richmond. And this kind of shows a bird's eye view of properties in development. And all of these will become various forms of affordable housing. So the yellow that you see is properties that are becoming single family homes, permanently affordable to folks making up to 80% of the area median income. And that they'll be sold through the Community Land Trust program. The red homes are going to be sold affordably through programs like Habitat for Humanity. And the square orange rectangles are going to be rentals, and they will be affordable to households making around 60% and below of the area median income. And anytime you see these numbers on the icons, this indicates that there's more than one unit in development. Next slide. So I'll give you a brief background about our wonderful Citizens Advisory Panel, but I'm sure that by the end of this meeting that all new attendees will kind of have gotten the hang of it. So we shorten the Citizens Advisory Panel to the CAP, and the CAP makes recommendations on property use as well as end users. And end users, again, it's just a fancy land bank term for the folks who submit applications and are successfully awarded land bank property. So the CAP holds at least 4 public meetings per year like this one. This is the first of the year. So welcome everyone. We hope that you continue to join us for the next 3 meetings throughout this year. There are 9 total CAP members. They are duly appointed by the City of Richmond and the board of the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. And actually we'll be talking about this, but we have 2 vacancies on the CAP right now. So if this process is really inspiring to you, or if you feel strongly about, having representation on this board, then we can talk about what the application process looks like for that a little bit later. Next slide. So let's just run through how the Richmond Land Bank works again, because I know I just went through a lot of information with everyone. Generally, in most cases, properties are transferred from the city to the Richmond Land Bank through a process called direct sale. And that is generally what we call it when properties are diverted from going to tax auction and rather sold directly to us. for the cost of recording fees. And the next step is that properties are reviewed by us as staff and the Citizens Advisory Panel to determine best use. And Flora, if you advance, I think the little icon will pop up. So we'll hold a meeting like this, and this meeting in particular, we won't be discussing properties and their land use. That will probably be at the meeting in the spring. But generally, it'll be at a regular CAP meeting. Richmond Land Bank and Maggie-Walker Community Land Trust staff will present the properties that we have received from the city, and we will talk over each property with the CAP, and CAP members will ask questions, and we'll try to determine, and folks in attendance, public members of the public, will be able to make comments and also submit comments ahead of time. And we try to arrive at land use decisions through that process. So a land use decision might be, these properties will be best suited for affordable housing development. These properties will be best suited for green space. And that kind of informs how we publicize our open application period. So next slide. Applicants then can submit proposals online to the Richmond Land Bank to purchase specific properties once their use has been designated. And at a meeting like this, the Citizens Advisory Panel will review their applications. So that's kind of what we'll be doing tonight with the JXN Project, as our chair alluded to. And then once a successful applicant has been chosen, properties are transferred with a small fee to the applicant that most aligns with our goals and priorities, which again are affordable housing, green space, and other community uses. And the result is that once vacant property is returned to productive and beneficial uses for the community. So that can look like a number of things, and end users could be nonprofits, for-profits, or even individuals. And that is all from me. So thanks so much for everybody's attention. And we hope that if there's anything that isn't clear from this presentation, by the end, hopefully some of your questions will be answered.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Appreciate that overview as always. And the next item on our agenda is really just a quick review of our meetings from November 3rd. And those are public on the website for those of you who are not members of the panel itself. And so I'll just ask my colleagues on the panel, were there any corrections or changes to those minutes from November? I'm looking at heads and all. If not, I think we will accept those as read. Just FYI, we are not a formal board or entity, so we don't formally follow Robert's Rules of Orders where we make motions and second them. Our decision-making process is really by consensus. And so based on not hearing any changes or corrections from the panel member or from staff, we'll accept those. Before we get the updates and then move into the JXN proposal, Julia had mentioned that we have 2 vacancies, and I just want to publicly acknowledge the tremendous contributions and work of 2 of our members. One of them is not with us anymore. She's not even in Richmond anymore. Melissa Rivera. She was with Groundwork, RVA, and just did a phenomenal job really on educating us about urban green space and urban landscaping. So we are going to miss her presence and her contribution. She has gone back home to New York, doing the same kind of work there that she started off with, that she brought to Richmond and is taking back up there. And the other individual who is who is present today is Helen Hardiman. And Helen, we know this is your last meeting. We are going to miss you tremendously, but so appreciate the passion and the expertise in housing that you brought to our work. So thank you again for that. And for those of you just that might be interested, we'll probably put out in chat the link to the application if you're interested in being considered and being a member of the Citizens Advisory Panel. In fact, Laura has already put that out there. So make sure that you copy and paste if you're interested in going through that application process. Based on that, the only other thing I want to mention is there's one staff person that is not here today, and that's Nikki Damery. She's our Director of Homeowner Engagement and Stewardship. And I mentioned Nikki because she's just done a phenomenal job with so much related to home ownership, as Julia was alluding to. But I just ask you to keep her in your thoughts and prayers. She has had death in the family and therefore could not attend today. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to either Julia or Flora to kind of pick up from here about surplus properties, new positions, Bank of America, building update, etc.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. And I do think I need to seek clarity about this, but our two positions that are open are actually, one of them is appointed by City Council, one of them is appointed by the Mayor's office. And I know Flora linked the application for those of you interested on the call. Flora linked in the chat the application that you would definitely use for the City Council appointment. And I need to double check if that's the same one that you'd use for the mayoral appointment or if there's some other process. But if you have any questions, it might just be helpful for you to email us directly. We'll drop it in the chat, landbank@mwclt.org, because we can help direct you towards the proper applications via email as well. And then I also wanted to take a few minutes to give a little bit of an update on the Bank of America building. So the Bank of America building, I know I just spent all this time telling everyone about how we generally get properties from the city, from the tax delinquent and surplus list. But one property that we received in the last several years was a little bit different, kind of a unique case. It was a donation of a former Bank of America building in Northside on the 6 Point intersection, right off of Brooklyn Park Boulevard. And we spent basically most of last year holding a public request for proposals process. We had several CAP meetings in which we met prospective applicants and heard from them. And much deliberation was made. And finally, last November, the property was awarded to Hand Up for their vision to create a community pharmacy in the space. And so my update is essentially that we are working with Hand Up to get ready to sign the lease in the next few weeks. Part of the terms of the award were that we would lease the property to the applicant for the first 1 to 3 years. And that's because they're trying out a new business model and we want to support them and ensure that it's successful and can get off the ground before they make the commitment of purchasing the building. They've made a lot of really exciting partnerships with folks who are doing complementary and similar work. And so really this is just a heads up to kind of keep your ears to the ground, because there are pretty regular updates in Richmond BizSense and other local publications about this development. And I think that they will also be appointing a few members of the Northside community. So if anyone on the call is from the Northside community, feel free to also email us for more information about this. They have a advisory board themselves as a new nonprofit pharmacy, and they will be seeking a few members of the community to be representatives on that board as well. So feel free to get in touch with any questions about that. And I think the next item is actually mine as well. So I hate to monopolize the floor, but I think you'll be hearing from me a little bit more tonight. So bear with me, everybody. I wanted to update members of the public and the Citizens Advisory Panel about a really exciting development with our partnership with the City of Richmond. And Flora, I don't know if you can pull up the attachment that I provided in the board packet, or a map that shows these surplus properties just as an illustration. But while Flora's—
I can try, but I'll need a minute, sorry.
Oh yeah, that's totally fine. As you're doing that, I'll just give a little bit of background and then we'll try to have some visual accompaniment too for everybody. So essentially, the Richmond Land Bank worked with the city of Richmond over the past year to identify properties on its surplus list. And these were transferred, or this activity in general was one of the goals in the mayor's equity agenda, which was adopted last June. And it actually is part of a larger goal of transferring up to 100 city-owned parcels to the Community Land Trust over the next 4 years to aid in homeownership, the creation of more homeownership opportunities. So we received the first 15 of these, potentially up to 100 properties, right at the beginning of 2022. And Flora has made a wonderful map that shows where they're located. These are the yellow markers that you see sort of dispersed throughout the city. So we have some in several different neighborhoods and council districts. And we wanted to provide a brief update to the CAP about these properties because, as I mentioned in my 101 presentation, generally our process is to present properties, to discuss land use possibilities, and then to open them up for application. But we as staff believe that some of these lots aren't 100% build ready and they potentially have additional infrastructural needs and challenges, or they're sites that are larger than single family lots, which could accommodate potentially a greater number of units than is currently allowed by right. So we wanted to let everyone know that we have put together a grant application to cover the costs of hiring an engineer to put together initial site plans. And the goal behind that would be to make the eventual process of designating development on these lots and transferring them to applicants through our application process more efficient. And also our goal is really to create quality developments that are appropriate for each neighborhood. And that might look a little bit different from neighborhood to neighborhood. So we're proposing that although we've received these properties already, we discuss land use recommendations with the CAP and members of the public who attend that meeting at a later date, probably at our meeting in April, if I'm doing the correct, April or May, because we hope to have these analyses done to sort of guide that conversation. Thanks, Flora, for pulling that map up.
And so I think at this point we are ready, are we not, to hear more about the JXN Project proposal. Julia, there's nothing else that needs to be covered before that, is there? No, okay. So I have the honor of just presenting to you Dr. Sisha Moon and Anjali Moon. And we heard an initial proposal, initial presentation back in our November meeting, which was just phenomenal and so well received, not only by us, but by the community at large who was present. And I notice a number of them are present tonight, along with some additional folks. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more because we really want to allow as much time as possible for you guys to make your presentation. I will ask that afterwards, we will open it up for questions or comments, whatever the public might be interested in. What I will ask you to do when we get to that point, if you use that icon and raise your hand or put a question in chat or a comment, and then we'll try to moderate it to make sure that everyone has some floor time before the CAP has any comments or conversations. So Moon Sisters, would you take it from here, please?
Absolutely. I'm going to try to get screen sharing capabilities in one quick moment. Ms. Creighton, quick question. How much time do we have to present?
I'm sorry, you have 25 to 30 minutes.
Is that including Q&A or?
That's just
Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right. I'm gonna pull this up. And I'm gonna let Anjali go ahead and kick us off.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having us back here yet again. My name is Anjali Moon. I am the Assistant Director of the JXN Project and Director of Programming. I do a couple of other things. I have a film festival called Africana, which I'm the founder and creative director. And I'm also the Assistant Curator of Film and Special Programs at the ICA. I do a few other things in the city, but essentially, I'm a Richmond girl, and it's a pleasure to be able to work on this project with you.
So I'm Seisha Joy Moon. I'm the Executive Director of the JXN Project, but my additional duties are Chief Diversity Officer at the National Institute of Standards and Technology within the U.S. Department of Commerce. You know, I'm an academic by trade. I do a couple of things. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta and a couple of other things that I hold near and dear. But as Anjali said, we're just two little Black girls from Byrd Park on the west end of Richmond, Virginia. We're happy to be here with you guys.
So the JXN Project. JXN Project, as many of you who have heard anything about our story knows, this is the project that we didn't know was going to be a project. As I mentioned, I have a film festival in 2020. Like most places, we had to pivot to virtual. It was our 5-year anniversary, however, so wanted to show up in community. Looking to do that by doing projections on different platforms in different neighborhoods, reached out to Seisha as a resident researcher and asked her to look up 10 Black facts associated with each neighborhood. One of those neighborhoods, of course, was Jackson Ward. We get to Jackson Ward and the question comes up of, well, who is the Jackson? I know who I had always been told the Jackson was Giles B. Seisha goes to do a little bit of additional research and we kind of come across this rabbit hole of sorts that takes us to the naming convention that I'll let Seisha talk about a little bit. But it ended up opening up this doorway to learn more about Jackson Ward, this area that I consider myself close to. I worked there for about 10 years at the Croker Spot, and it's a place that's near and dear to my heart, but realized with all that I thought I knew, there was so much more there. And so we had the pleasure of uncovering the origin story dating back to 1871 of Jackson Ward. We were able to celebrate that in April. Some of you all may have been there in attendance for our Illuminating Legacies. And we've done some additional work that we'll talk about, such as changing some of the street names to be more representative of the legacies associated with that area.
Is it stuck?
Yeah, looks like it.
All right, so I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna try to, break this down in a nutshell. So as Anjali said, she reaches out, sisterly favor, hey, I'm trying to do these projections throughout the city. Can you couple them with 10 facts? I think when you're born and raised in a place like Richmond, Virginia, as I often say, it's like the statues at one point, the streets and the school names, they all just kind of fade to Black because they're a part of your everyday lived experience. And so it had just never dawned on me to ever question who is Jackson and Jackson Ward, even though I spent so much time there growing up. And so, Google is supposed to answer everything. And so we go to Google and we think that this is going to be a quick and easy answer. And as Anjali said, it leads to a Pandora's box, letting us know that this is actually a question that's been a point of contention since 1902. The name was associated with 5 potential Jacksons. You had President Andrew Jackson, and that was derived because Richmond used to operate by a ward system, hence the name Jackson Ward. That's as early as the early 1800s. And several of the wards were named after notable statesmen or presidents. So that's where that assumption came from. Then you had what we were told was James Jackson's beer garden. However, James was actually Joseph, and Joseph had a pleasure garden. So the pleasure gardens are a little bit different because they emerged in the early 1800s versus beer gardens didn't really come into the United States until around the 1850s. The inherent purpose of them were a little bit different. Pleasure gardens were more so festive spaces for entertainment, versus beer gardens were really centered around drinking and were really of an immigrant tradition. But Joseph Jackson, so first, that was the first thing. It's a pleasure garden, not a beer garden. His name was Joseph, not James. But what was also interesting is that people assumed that Joseph or James was white, or was Black, but it turns out that he was a white gentleman. And what we deduce is the reasoning that people assume that he was Black is because when you see like those famous photos of like the Emancipation Day parades on Broad Street, what you will find is that the parade routes actually started in front of his pleasure garden. And so it might have just been an assumption that someone that allows these type of Emancipation Day parades to start in front of his business was Black. He was actually a white man. But then you have a James Jackson who was Black, and he was one of the first pharmacists within the city of Richmond who was from Jackson Ward. And you might know his daughter's name because she actually went to UVA and is critical, what was the court case that the Duval Act, and the court case that actually had about 30 years worth of Black Richmonders and Virginians having to go out of state to get formal education. So that's that. Then we landed on Giles B. Jackson. So as Anjali stated, that's the name that a lot of people say is their truth. That's who they honor in this with the name Jackson Ward. And he was the first African-American to be barred within the state of Virginia to practice law, and then went on to do several different things. He curated the Tercentennial Celebration for America as one of the first Black formalized museums. He had an anthology. I mean, he was a jack of all trades. But then that landed us on Stonewall. When we were trying to understand more about Jackson Ward, that's when we recovered the origin date, April 17th, 1871. But then it forced us to do a deeper dive into understanding that it was a gerrymandered political district. And if we're looking at the height of Reconstruction, we're thinking, well, why would they want to gerrymander a space? And you only want to gerrymander a space if they are exercising their political power and you want to kind of disrupt it to sorts. So that led us to understanding more about the industrial wave, late 1700s, early 1800s, understanding more about the migration of local Black Richmonders and Virginians from plantations in the county, and they're moving into city center, into plants, industrial plants in the city like a Tredegar Iron Works. And then we start to understand more about the leasing out and hiring out of enslaved people, how that then positions you to not even live with your enslaver because you're technically living off site. And you could be leased out from everything from a year to a day in some instances. And it also positioned you to then be able to earn income. If it was outside of one, you satisfied the terms of your lease to your enslaver and the broker, but then also you could also take on odd jobs. And so Anjali likes to say, like when we think about Jackson Ward being the birthplace of Black entrepreneurship, this is where you see things like the side hustle. You see those grog shops and those eateries starting to pop up during this period. And so once we understood that then led us to say, okay, so this is the height of Reconstruction. We understand 1870 is a very problematic year in the state of Virginia, particularly in Richmond, because we have Union occupation being challenged by ex-Confederates. And literally the city of Richmond, if you know local history, is quite literally on fire. And so that led us to understanding more about the Constitutional Convention, understanding more about local dynamics, particularly as it relates to the mayoral race. And then that led us to understanding that in addition to Jackson Ward, to the north of Richmond, you have Richmond County. Between 1870 and 1871, they established townships, and named one of them the Stonewall Township. And then the day after, Jackson Ward is established in the city of Richmond to the south in Manchester. And remember, Manchester at this time isn't yet annexed into the city of Richmond. They then proposed to establish two new districts within their city at the time, and they want to name them Lee and Jackson. And so that helped us to deduce that it is, the compelling evidence that's more than likely named after Stonewall. So I tried to give you all the hour-long lecture that we did with Library of Virginia, Rich Public Library, in hopefully like 5 minutes. We're a research-based organization, so primary artifacts are critical in our work. As you will see here, this is a gerrymandered map in one of the local newspapers at the time. Black Richmonders at one point occupied Clay, Monroe, Madison, and Jefferson wards, but then the 6th ward. So if you've ever seen our our branding, it's been the city 6th ward, because that's when Jackson was established. This one is always the most compelling to me. This right here, if you follow my mouse, that is actually the city directory from 1852. And what you will find are over 370 Black residents who are freed. And not only freed, they're professionals, they're homeowners, because this directory actually has their addresses, what their professions are. And you just don't think about that. You know, it's 2 Black girls born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. I never would have fathomed that there were nearly 400 residents that were freed well before Emancipation Proclamation. And so that leads us to understanding more about the political boundaries. These red dots denote Black home ownership in the city of Richmond in 1856. And then if you follow my mouse, I know it's kind of hard to zoom in, but literally that same footprint is what is used to draw the gerrymandered political district known as Jackson Ward. And what we also learned throughout this exercise is that the historical footprint of Jackson Ward actually extended past the Main Street station and the burial ground all the way to 18th Street. So I know we think about the footprint today as a historic district, but in the historical context, it was much more. So we didn't want all of that to just sit with the Moon sisters. And so the world's longest sisterly favor emerged as a project and now turned nonprofit. And I'll let Anjali kind of talk about the 8 pillars that guide our work.
All right. So as Tisha said, you know, we have the 8 pillars. I call them the 8 Ps, excuse me. And we'll go through this kind of quickly. I know we're kind of winding down on time. So quickly, there's pedagogy, public art, public programming, public service policy and planning, philanthropy, public engagement, and public engagement. We also have preservation and proprietorship on the rise. And so pedagogy, Tisha mentioned briefly the summer lecture series that we did alongside Library of Virginia and Richmond Public Library. This gave us an opportunity to create space for conversation so that we aren't sitting with this information so it doesn't become siloed. You know, one of the things that's just really heartbreaking about this information is that we understand how impactful it is, how much it can influence the way that we see the world, and it's been just buried. So we want to make sure that we're sharing it out, and that's one of the ways in which we did that. Public art, as I mentioned earlier, I have a film festival called Africana. One of the ways that we've done some work is Jackson partnered with Africana to help on a film screening over the summer, How the Monuments Came Down, which was hosted at Maymont. It was an interesting, film. Robust conversation that happened on site and with the artists to create public art projects as we continue this work. I want to make sure you guys can hear. Public programming, I mentioned earlier, Illuminating Legacies. So Illuminating Legacies was the opportunity for us to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Jackson Ward, or the establishment of Jackson Ward. We were able to take over that historical footprint that Tisha referenced and celebrate, bring people out. We had projections hosted all throughout that historical footprint and giving people an opportunity to be introduced to this information once again that we're coming across. Public service policy and planning. One of the things that you realize in doing this work is that every single thing that was done to disenfranchise Jackson Ward was done at the bequest of the city, right? These are administrative decisions that are being made. And so we want to make sure that we are helping to empower community in terms of utilizing their voice. So in spaces like the Urban and Design Committee, the Planning Commission, Architectural Review Boards, these are spaces where community members can hold seats. But a lot of people don't know that. They don't understand the actual process to engage. And so we are looking to use the Jackson platform to help invite people into that process and to make sure they're utilizing their voice properly. Philanthropy, you know, at the end of the day, it's about resources. We had the good fortune of receiving some funds from the state, but we did not receive those funds without making sure that we could earmark some of them for philanthropy. And so we've donated $50,000 of those funds back into the Jackson Ward community. Anything ranging from grassroots organizations up to institutions like the Black History Museum for the Adele Johnson Fund. We also have our public engagement, which is Unveiling the Vanguard, excuse me, as an example. So Unveiling the Vanguard was our opportunity to kind of put a bow on the 150th anniversary celebration. And this is where we did the unveiling of 15 different street signs throughout Jackson Ward. And this allowed us to elevate and celebrate the legacies of Black people throughout Jackson Ward, because one of the things that we learned in this process of research is that most of the streets throughout Jackson Ward are actually named after not only white people, but Confederate generals, Confederate sympathizers, and just flat out racist. And so we had to find a way to rectify that. Preservation, we're going to talk about with Skipwith-Roper, and proprietorship, we'll talk about with the Jackson House as we move forward.
All right, I know we're running low on time. Ms. Creighton, where are we at time?
Really want to make sure that we have ample time for the proposal.
Yes.
So, yep.
Okay, so these are some images from Illuminating Legacies. These are some images from Unveiling the Vanguard, and this brings us to Skipwith. So when we were trying to figure out who to honor with these honorary street, we were trying to honor with these honorary street designations. We wanted to make sure that we capture the full arc of the ward. So you have some, more modern contemporary figures like Lorna and Lily, but then we also wanted to make sure that we honored what we knew at the time is just the first known Black homeowner in Jackson Ward. At the time, that's all we knew. That's all historians knew, and that he was one of the first, if not the first, Black Richmonders or Virginians with a fully executed will. But in order to complement his bio with the other members of the Vanguard, we had to do our research and put back on our research hat to figure out his full life. We don't have all the time in the world to go through it today, but we will give you a snapshot of Skipwith's story. But this weekend, we will officially be launching the Skipwith-Roper Homecoming, where we'll share a more in-depth understanding of his life. But in short, I will just say this is his life in a nutshell. Skipwith is a gentleman who we know was enslaved as early as 1767 by some of the most notable people in the state who worked for Thomas Jefferson. And what we know is that he was enslaved between the Richmond, Henrico, and Williamsburg areas. He's in around 1782, he's been sold to his last known enslaver in the Williamsburg area, and his enslaver, who's connected to the Revolutionary War. There are actually a lot of articles on whether or not he caused the Revolutionary War. There's been books and papers written about it. He abruptly dies. And once he abruptly dies, Skipwith files a legislative petition for his freedom. This legislative petition is very enlightening because, one, when we talk about the urbanized enslavement, it shows that Skipwith actually worked as a clerk. He rejected the name being called a slave. It also confirmed that he was a mixed race gentleman, and it also confirmed his direct connectivities to certain founding fathers, including a signer of the Declaration of Independence. We know that once he leaves the Williamsburg area, or once he files the petition, it is denied. And we were just kind of like blown because we were like, well, how can this not be approved when you are filing legislative petition and you have some of the forefathers of this country backing your petition? It didn't quite make sense. So that made us go spend some more time with his last known enslaver. This is a colonizer from England who makes his way to the United States by way of Florida, touches in Virginia for a little while, and then helps to colonize Illinois. This is a gentleman who marries into one of the richest families in an indigenous village outside of what will become the city center of Illinois. But then he's abruptly arrested in around 1776, 1777 for double dealing between Great Britain and America. Once he's away, he then thinks that his wife is pretty much cheating on him with the gentleman that he left in charge of his estate while he's gone. So when he returns to the village, he kicks her out of the house. And then the next known whereabout of him is he abruptly dies in around 1782, 1783. That then helped us crack the code because the executor of his estate goes on to put up the equivalent of billboards or flyers all throughout the indigenous village, accusing the wife of adultery. And he uses this to pretty much X her out of the will, only leaving her a buck out of what is modern day millions of dollars. She doesn't let this lie. She goes and she does several different court cases. The estate is held in contention, and that is why Skipwith's legislative petition wasn't approved. It's then approved 2 weeks later after the estate is actually settled, and the next known whereabout of him is in 1793 when he lands in the northern edge of the city of Richmond, which eventually would become Jackson Ward 100 years later. He builds what we know is a gambrel roof cottage. We know that following year that he then manumits his wife and one of his granddaughters. And then we know in 1797, that's when he becomes one of the first, if not the first, Black Richmonders or Virginians with a fully executed will. And he bequeaths possessions, parcels, and property to his descendants, to include some that were enslaved, with the foresight of saying, how can you leverage this will, last will and testament as a blueprint to manumit yourself after my death. We know that he dies in around 1799. Because that's when his will was proved. And he leaves the home, as we said, to his descendants. It stays in the family's custody for about 100 years. But then in the early 1900s, it changes hands with another Black family named the Colemans. His descendants are quite notable in their own right, doing a lot to create the first Black freed cemeteries in the city, as well as becoming one of the first Black council members of Jackson Ward once it becomes a gerrymandered political district. So then, it changes hands with the Colemans, and then all that we know is that they're condemned from the property in the 1950s because of the Richmond Petersburg Turnpike. So when we start to do a little bit more digging, we're like, hey, several sources said that the house was demolished because of the turnpike. And when we're doing this story, let me see if I can show it, with Michael Paul, we're like, well, we think that the property has been demolished. And he's like, hey, actually, I think it might have been relocated. And come to find out, after the Colemans were condemned from the property, the home was purchased for private home ownership, and it was actually moved to a nearby county, and not just any, and it's not just in any landing space. It's currently sitting on the former plantation of the Secretary of War for the Confederacy. So we immediately reach out, trying to understand, well, of course, this house needs to come back to Jackson Ward. Skipwith almost can't rest peacefully in power with the home being there. The family was very gracious, let us come out to the home, let us bring a team of historic preservation architects, look at the fabric. And what we recognized is that actually, because of the relocation in 1957, 58, as well as a recent renovation of the home, which you will see here in 2004, the original fabric within the home was removed from the structure. And so because of that, we had to go back to the drawing board, have conversations with National Park Service, consult with entities like a DHR, consult and Historic Richmond, and think about what those treatment options could be. And that's how we landed on a reconstruction for interpretive purposes, so that we can honor Skipwith, because we really feel like he is the forefather, not only of Jackson Ward, but even when we think about Black home ownership, in the essence of what this community land bank is about, he is the first. And we can't really do justice to a community like Jackson Ward and help to heal it until we do right by the shoulders in which we stand on. This is what the home looked like at the time of moving. I think that it's important to know, he sold parcels to his descendants. This was an estate to him. This is Black, this space should be regarded as Black Richmond, Black Virginia, Black Americas, Monticello, and Mount Vernon. It deserves that level of reverence and that level of significance. It's been great to work with key partners like Library of Virginia to really take a deeper dive on the Richmond Petersburg Turnpike, understanding how it happened. Not just the construction, we focus a lot on the construction, but really diving deep on the planning of it, and how we arrived at this space. And so the goal is to bring this thing back. We had the opportunity or to rebuild it, to bring it back. We had opportunity to meet with Pete Buttigieg and his team because they understand that this reconstruction can serve as a lot. It can serve as a model on what Black home ownership looks like, a model on what Black entrepreneurship looks like. It can serve as a model on how we pivot the current standards and what spaces are worth saving within the field of historic preservation and planning, because this is an example where we have to reconstruct because the aspects of homes that were Black have been erased. And this can also serve as a real calling call to urban planning and infrastructure on how to reconnect these communities that were intentionally devastated. We know the project will probably end up costing about $5.68 million for the reconstruction of not only this space, but then also the Jackson House, which will serve as a historical hub. But we want to rebuild this home that fits several pillars, harnessing history. It also has to do with creating community spaces. It fits several of the guiding principles of the Maggie Walker Land Trust and getting, being endowed with these parcels will be a key step in that process as we try to build out a space that's a historic site, but also with outdoor green space for community programming and placemaking that can become a destination of choice with a runway to 2026 as part of the 250th anniversary of this country, because we feel like Skipwith is a multidimensional narrative in a forefather in himself that had connections to forefathers, but then also when we think about bringing that 1 in 4 Black American that has roots in Richmond to our city. Lee, go for it. If you have anything else,
I do not. I think that you covered it all and you covered it well. You know, I think it's really exciting to have the opportunity to reconstruct a remnant. It is very rare that we find this sort of opportunity as it's connected to Black history dating back into the 1700s. Typically, you know, we're going back into the 1800s, late 1800s. So to be able to take it this far back and to be able to have something like a blueprint that we have through the will to actually reconstruct it with a level of extreme accuracy is extremely important and exciting. And so to be able to bring this into Jackson Ward and to a side of Jackson Ward that unfortunately hasn't gotten a lot of investment, right? You know, we have the historic footprint of Jackson Ward, but here we have the opportunity to move to the other side of Jackson Ward to bring a level of energy, discourse, and engagement around a community space, a space that will house green space so that people can host events. It's an exciting opportunity to be able to build something and to have a level of Black ownership and Black roots in that space because we see what's happened on the other side of Jackson Ward. What can we learn from that? And so hopefully one of the lessons that we learn is that we have to take advantage of the opportunities that we have at hand in order to allow for the people who represent that legacy to hold on to that legacy so that we don't end up a bunch of place markers throughout Jackson Ward.
Again, I'm almost speechless. I have no words, you know, as Helen is doing. Thank you both again for the amount of effort, energy, research, passion that you have invested in this process. And it just, you know, causes my soul to jump and to applaud. And we want to open it now for questions or comments from the community at large. So we're going to allow at least about 15 or 20 minutes for that. I'm seeing now in the chat, amazing work, amazing, powerful, thank you. Anyway, questions. I've got my grid, so I think I can see. Flora, can we take off the screen sharing and then I can see more of who's out here?
And I think as a note, we wanted to pull up really quickly a map of the parcels that the Richmond Land Bank owns in this neighborhood, just as context. And so I think Flora is working on doing that right now. And so
sorry, sorry, I can't. I'm having some technical difficulties.
Oh, no worries. Maybe I can try. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So just to give some background, the Richmond Land Bank has owned 15 properties in a neighborhood in Jackson Ward that's really bounded by, can everyone see this, by the way? It's bounded by the two interstates, 95 and 64. So it's really become an urban heat island. There's been reference to it in New York Times articles of the last few years. And as our wonderful presenters were just mentioning, there hasn't been a very equal amount of investment in this particular 4-block neighborhood, or even in the sort of neighborhood that radiates outward. So this map shows you right now on what sites the Richmond Land Bank owns in this area. We own all the sites with a bounding box around them. So the orange sites represent 5 properties that are not being considered in this application. And the blue box represents 10 properties that the Jackson Project is proposing to acquire from the Richmond Land Bank in order to site the Skipwith Cottage Homecoming Project, and as well the hub that will be sort of a cultural heritage site and a really amazing resource for the neighborhood in general. So this is just a bit of context. I don't have to leave it up, but I wanted everyone to know where we're talking about. And if you want to zoom out on this map, or a map that shows these properties, we have a property map on our website, which I can link as well. So I'm going to stop sharing now so that our chair can see who's out there with questions and comments.
Great, thank you, Julia. Appreciate your showing those properties. And so we've seen lots of comments in the chat. And so wanting to see if there are any questions or comments verbally from anyone that is on this call. And again, if you just raise your hand, or even, since it's not a lot, take yourself off mute. I see one question that has popped up in the chat. Will those parcels be developed into additional housing units by Jackson, or is the intention the Skipwith Homecoming and Green community space with those parcels?
The latter.
Yeah, it would fit the guiding principle of create quality community spaces. So this would be a historic site on the inside, but we're going to be very intentional about programmable, sustainable outdoor green space for community use on the exterior of the home. But the goal is for this to be a historic site a la Maggie Walker National Historic Site.
Thank you.
And Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate the comment, and we are launching the capital campaign come this weekend, and so we'll be sharing that via our social media channels. So please follow us.
And there was another question from Kim Gray about the recording being made available. Yes, it will be on the website. We put all of ours out there. I think this is also being live streamed, if Flora told me that earlier. So yes, this will be available after this meeting.
Yes, it's being live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you look up Maggie Walker CLT on YouTube, you will be able to watch this back again.
Okay, I'm looking for other questions or comments.
The Jackson Project, that's JXN Project. You can follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. We'll put that in the chat.
This is Anjali. This is Gary Flowers.
Hello.
Am I heard?
Yes.
Hello there. I am a member of the Public Art Commission and local radio show host, but I'm a fourth generation resident of historic Jackson Ward. And first of all, kudos to the Moon sisters for a brilliantly researched and articulated statement to the significance of Abraham Skipwith and his relevance to not only Richmond and Virginia, but to the nation. I just want to bring in one point. As developers and as politicians seek to connect or reconnect the portions of Jackson Ward that were separated by Interstate 95, I would say clearly that to do so in a new form with a new name without extending the boundaries of historic Jackson Ward to re-include Mrs. Walker's corporate headquarters would be a desecration to her building and a dismemberment of her vision of Jackson Ward. Jackson Ward extended from Broad Street to the Chaco Valley, what we now know as the First Street Bridge. And anything in the form of development that would so-called reconnect Jackson Ward without its historic boundaries being extended to the original boundaries would be, once again, insult to her legacy.
And there's a couple. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I see one hand up and then two other questions in the chat. So I'm going to go with the raised hand first. And I think that's Michael. Is it Comedic?
That's correct. How are you?
How are you? Thank you for showing up today. So questions or comments?
Sure. This is just a quick question. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all the work that the Moon Sisters have done on this. This is more a question of how the land bank and how the land trust works. Is the property going to be transferred, the ownership of the property going to be transferred to the Jackson Project, or is this just another type of land lease? That's my only question. I'm just trying to figure out the details of it a little bit better.
And Julia, why don't you take that?
Yeah, that's a great opportunity to clarify what we mean by land use. So designating land use is step one before properties are in fact transferred. I would say sold, but they're really transferred for sort of a nominal fee and to recoup the costs that we've gotten from maintenance and recording the title for properties. So this proposal is a proposal for the Jackson Project to acquire and become the new owner of these 10 parcels in this neighborhood, if that clears things up.
That does. Thank you.
And there's a couple of questions that, Dante, before you ask your question, I see one from, is it Irina Kalos, about nearby residents near Mount Moriah specifically approved of this project versus the other concepts listed in the North Jackson Ward plan. And then also from Katie Whelan, would love to hear from residents north of the freeway, how will you include the community? So again, Julia, would you kind of update folks on what has happened as far as the level of community engagement and also related to this particular proposal?
Yeah, I think that probably some of the specifics about engagement for this particular proposal will probably also be provided by the Jackson Project as well. So the Richmond Land Bank generally publicizes proposals and applications on our website, and where we have them open for public comment for some time. And the same has been the case for this proposal. I think that it could be up to the CAP's discretion if they feel that because this is a really big and exciting project, maybe before an official decision or transfer is made, the proposal could, stay up on our website for a few more weeks with additional rounds of publicity. I think that could be one way to approach including additional voices in hearing feedback about this particular application. I think that what that comment was referring to was a resource that we circulated with the publication about this meeting. And that's an exploratory study that we did back in 2020 with the help of Historic Richmond and Ebony Walding Consulting, as well as Forum Coalition. And the purpose of that study, it was not a small area plan. So it's not a prescriptive study that says, this is absolutely what's going to happen in this neighborhood. It was a chance for us to go out, and I think over 100 residents of the Gilpin area were surveyed about sort of their past, present, and future visions of their neighborhood. And so that study essentially was kind of a first step into getting to hear a little bit from residents and stakeholders and folks who work in the neighborhood about what they think of their neighborhood and what they'd like to see in the future. And part of that was taking survey responses and sort of digesting them and making conceptual plans. And those conceptual plans, there were 3 different plans, and you can see this all on our website. If you didn't see it, we can also link to it in the chat, of course. But some of those plans had to do more with housing. Some of them had to do more with uplifting the history of the neighborhood. And then some of them were sort of a combination of all of these concepts. And so those are really, I guess I could see how it'd be misleading that they're out there because they're not, official small area plans that completely determine the fate of a neighborhood. They're really more just a chance for us to explore visioning with folks in the neighborhood about what they'd like to see. And we see this proposal from the Jackson Project is really aligning with some of the conceptual plans that were produced through that work. So we'll link that in the chat. And And hopefully that answers some of those questions. And then I'd love to hear from the CAP, you know, if they feel that additional input is needed from folks in the surrounding area. I think that the CAP has been really helpful in kind of giving that suggestion to Richmond Land Bank staff before next steps are taken. So we're definitely open to that.
Great, thank you. And I think we are going to move to Dante. You've had your hand up for a while. And so your question or comment, sir?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share my excitement about what I heard tonight, but also to say that I'm excited that we are even getting any attention on this side of the bridge. I am from that side of the bridge. I am from this side of the bridge, and I am a member of Greater Mount Moriah Baptist Church. My whole life I've been there, and my family, we lived right there on, well, not me, but my family lived on 3rd and Preston. And so I'm familiar with the area, and I remember the area so clear, even when I was a young kid. So I just want to know, basically to the JXN Project, how those residents that are living there, they've already asked the question, how they will be included as you go forward and as you move forward, as well as Greater Mount Moriah, because we are a church that still sit there in the community and have so much influence right there in that community. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say, and blessings.
Well, first, thank you. We appreciate your excitement, and hopefully we look forward to your support as we move forward. You know, one of the things that we have attempted to do as we started this project, as we said earlier, we didn't necessarily step into this thinking it was going to be a project. So we're kind of constantly trying to catch up with ourselves in the way that it's going. But we've attempted to be as inclusive as possible in terms of being in conversation with community, because we understand that people have been doing this work in Jackson Ward and living in Jackson Ward, representing Jackson Ward long before we started this work. And so as we do that, and as we continue to kind of expand our vision, we're looking to expand that circle. And so we know for a fact that talking to our neighbors will be key. We understand Greater Mount Moriah's impact in that community. And so we would never attempt to endeavor to come into a neighborhood and parachute in and without making sure that we are hearing from the community and making them a part of the process. And so that is a process. This is step one kind of for us. And so we are looking forward to what it means to continue to build on that. And so hopefully remain in conversation with you and your family. It's exciting to know that they were once in that space. And so we look forward to hearing what it means to be in conversation, how we can represent that in energy and in aesthetic. So thank you.
And I think that's inherent. That's been inherent in our work. I think that's inherent who we are. You know, of course, we have this particular project, but we know a lot of eyes are on Jackson Ward. I mean, especially in the last couple of weeks with Secretary Buttigieg coming to the city, there's been a lot of talk. We try to hold space, even with the honorary street signs, because we view this all as Jackson Ward. I know that there's been, you know, contemplation about what we call the other side of the bridge, but to us, there's not another side. There isn't the Gilpin. It's Jackson Ward.
It's Jackson Ward.
It's Jackson Ward, period, full stop. And so our hope is to work with community to be able to pay homage to that. And one thing that we probably forgot to mention is, you know, we, as Anjali said, this is ancestrally guided, this assignment. And it's interesting, like Skipwith has opened up every door for Stephen to land in this Zoom tonight. And I think that, you know, of course, when we first set out, we thought, oh, we're going to bring that house back from Richmond County. And then they said, oh, well, no fabrics in it. So we had to pivot. But the great news about this pivot is it gives us opportunity to actually engage local community, local businesses to help rebuild this. This really offers a very different opportunity than maybe bringing that home in Richmond County would have. So we welcome the pivot and the partnership in this process.
And just as we think about what it means to represent community, just to piggyback off what Sisha is saying, you know, one of the things that we quickly realized as we were stepping into this preservation space is that we as Black people are not heavily represented within the preservation space, especially throughout Virginia. And so as we're bringing people out to survey the other house, to engage people in what it would have meant to move it from one place to another, we weren't able to engage with any Black contractors to help do that work. With us being able to reconstruct this home, we now have the opportunity to be extremely intentional about the partners are the people that we partner with and the constructors and developers that we bring into the process. And so now we can support Black and minority-owned businesses in a way that we couldn't do before. And to be able to do that in a space in Jackson Ward where Blackness and the legacy of Black generational wealth entrepreneurship is represented, we feel like it's a huge tie in terms of the thematics and the energy and what we hope to invest and be an example of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just tell Miss First Lady Loretta that we said hello. We appreciate.
I definitely will.
Please do. Yeah. Really holding space for community really has been important to us, and Greater Mount Moriah has been engaged with some of our work for the 150th. So
as soon as COVID is over, we're gonna be out there, but don't you worry about it.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to move into my role also as a task timekeeper. And since I know that we will be ending around 7 o'clock and we're getting close to that time, I want to check in with staff to see, were there any comments that came in writing before this meeting? Because we also open it up for those comments to come in. And I do want to allow some time for the CAP to raise some questions and to have some questions publicly. So Flora, were there any?
There was one comment on the website who was just someone, I believe, from the Historic Jackson Ward Association, who was just commenting that they're excited for the project.
Okay, great, thank you. So I really want to open it up and have CAP members, any questions or comments that you have, because again, there may be some more conversation, but while we have such a large group, would like to take advantage of others hearing some of the questions and comments that we have. And I will say this, Melissa is on this call. We didn't think you were going to be here. So welcome, Melissa.
Hey, y'all. Yeah, I couldn't miss this call. I love that. I wanted to hear more about the Jackson project. It sounded amazing.
Thank you. CAP members, any questions or comments?
Hey, this is Phil Cunningham. I'm a CAP member. And I did just post this in the chat, which I see that Sesha responded to, but I was just hoping to hear more about project partners, if they have been selected, such as your architect, contractor, things like that, as well as maybe just a high level timeline, assuming, you know, these lots are awarded to y'all, kind of what are the next steps as we reach, you know, over the next couple of years. So just kind of from a high level, that would be great. Thanks.
You want to take it?
Yeah, well, if the parcels are transitioned, we know that just based on preliminary conversations, that we need to do certain things like, I think someone just put in here, site plan, architectural designs, even geotechnical analysis. However, our first order of business will be an archaeological analysis. One thing that we learned through Skipwith is that his body was buried at his home. So I'll let you piece that together. And so to make sure that we are building on a space that is not sacred ground will be critical. And then also finding out there are 2 current properties currently on the structures on the 10 parcels. And so since we are rooted in historic preservation and planning, what does it look like to preserve certain pieces of those if they are deemed as historic structures? And so I think it's some ground level work that has to be done first before we even start to break ground.
But in terms of the timeline, if things were to go exactly as planned, we would love to be able to unlock the doors to the first visitors of the Skipwith-Roper Manor in 2026. As Sesha stated earlier, we see this project in full alignment with the America 250 national project for the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. We think that Abraham Skipwith adds a level of complexity and further context to what it meant to be born in America, to be a Black person in America, and we want to diversify the narratives that we're sure the United States wants to kind of center. We know it'll be a lot of Boston, a lot of Philadelphia, maybe a little Jamestown. And unfortunately, Richmond often gets overlooked in terms of its importance in the American narrative. But we think that Abraham Skipwith is an opportunity to really center Richmond properly in the story of America, but also the Black American narrative.
Okay, other CAP members?
Yes, Michelle Mosby here.
Yes, hi, Michelle.
Hi. So ladies, I mean, spectacular. But you all know that. I am so excited that I'm a part of the CAP while this is happening. My question was about the timeline, and so that's kind of been already answered. I'm just excited, and I wanted to say that publicly. Again, we all know that Richmond, it doesn't quite get told. And so the in-depth that you all have taken to tell the entire story, kudos to you, that you didn't just stop at a portion. She did her whole homework. You all did your homework, and you have laid this entire story out. And so I'm excited about this moment, but even the more 2026 groundbreaking and what this will look like at its completion. I'm excited.
And let's just say, you know, and just to be clear, we don't even think we're rubbing the surface on the history of Jackson Ward, to be honest, Michelle. You know, we are excited about the Skipwith narrative, and we are learning more about Jackson Ward than is commonly told and what most people know. But what it lets us know is that it's so much more. And so we hope that, exactly, this is an invitation for more and more people to do research, you know, because we know we cannot do it all. That's where the Jackson House comes into play for community and grassroots researchers. And we aren't the first people to embark upon this research. We are part of a larger community. We are part of a continuum.
Absolutely.
So what does it mean for us to just pour into it the way we're supposed to, and then pass the baton to whomever is next? So thank you for that.
Love it.
And thank you, Michelle, for taking the time to share that. And not everyone goes to chat. So I do want to read the comment that was sent in through the website because Ms. Allen had asked about what was the comment. And this is a direct quote. I just received an email about this proposal through the Historic Jackson Ward Association. And I was thrilled because when the Land Trust held visioning sessions a few years ago, this is the kind of effort I envisioned as a community member. And I think it's important to share that because, again, it goes back to there has been community engagement and community voice that has been at the table even before the Jackson Project came. And so that's where there is tremendous alignment. We are not cutting off community voice, and we still do want to hear more from the community. So one of the things that we had said is that we may not make any final determinations at this particular moment. There may be some gathering of some more community input. So I just wanted to make sure that that comment, though, was heard, because I think it is significant when we look at the fact that it's all connected. It's all connected.
And Gwen, thank you for that. This is Janice. The information that you all sent about this meeting, once we forwarded it on, it really stirred conversation and questions. And, you know, that's why I'm looking forward to the additional engagement. It was open with a frequency, you know, pretty high frequency. And I got calls, and I hate to say it this way, I'm going to say it like Sisha said, from all of Jackson Ward. It wasn't just within, you know, the traditional footprint. I mean, I got calls from everywhere and comments just about how grateful people were to see this level of info. So thank you.
Okay, wonderful. And I think, Janice, with your being present and also making that comment, it provides another door, liaison connection for us to tap on, to leverage, to partner with as we look at getting some more community input. So thank you for being present, and thank you for sharing that. I do want to make this comment. Melissa Rivera is here today. As we mentioned earlier, she is no longer with us because I think, Melissa, you are in New York.
Yes, I'm in New York now.
Madam Chair, you might be muted.
You're on mute, Miss Creighton.
Oh, thank you. She said she just wanted to be present for the next step in this process and didn't want to miss out on it. Couple more minutes. Any closing comments before we talk about next steps?
Madam Chair, this is Hillary from the CAP. I have a few comments and questions.
Yes. Thanks.
So I wanted to first echo the sentiments. Amazing job. Third generation Richmonder here, and my dad born and raised in Bird Park. So awesome. I learned a lot through these meetings that I had never learned before growing up and going to RPS. So that was awesome. I just wanted to bring up that North Jackson Ward vision that the MWCLT did, and I wanted to call attention to the residents wanting their #1 pick of housing, and just call attention to the housing crisis in the city of Richmond. I am not against this project at all. I just want to call attention to that, and I have a question for staff. And then I have a few questions for the Jackson Project. So for the remaining lots, do we have any idea for a timeline there or what we will do? Because I would love to have this project and then designate or have a plan of trying to get the other lots to be housing.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the priority for the remaining 5 lots for us as well. And one thing I sort of mentioned, although I know I talked a lot, so maybe it got lost in there, was that we really see the Jackson Project's proposal as having the potential to be an anchor institution in this neighborhood. That currently there are a few structures that are occupied by tenants. There are several structures that are not occupied by anyone and haven't been for some time. And then there's a whole lot of vacant lots. So I think that the work that the Jackson Project is proposing is really even important to future development, such as housing in this neighborhood. And I know that we're not necessarily the only people thinking of creating housing in this neighborhood. So it's really important to us as staff to retain some of these lots that we own for the development of affordable and permanently affordable housing, just considering the impacts that reconnecting both sides of the highway will have on, folks being interested in building housing there, whether affordable or market rate. I know there's even been some like inching towards market rate development in that neighborhood, that particular like 4-block neighborhood already. So yeah, Hillary, at this point, we don't have a site plan, and we haven't had CAP meetings specific to those additional 5 properties that weren't in this proposal. But I think that from our perspective, it would be really important to build high quality, affordable housing there as well.
Great. So I just have a few other questions with respect to the surrounding Gilpin Court. We know that RRHA has slotted in their PHA plan to HUD of demolition and disposition of Gilpin Court, and they have, I think, a start date of 2016 and an end date of 2025. So with respect to community engagement and the happenings of this neighborhood, I just wanted to know if Jackson Project had any plan, or would you respond or make a statement on that if that were to happen? We are so focused, I think, on the land bank of displacement and gentrification. So I wanted just to call that out as well and see what you guys were thinking about on that.
It's in our pillars. I mean, one of the things that is inherent in our work isn't making sure that we don't displace current residents, but that we also repart for the residents that have been displaced in the past. And so we've advocated for that in every room that we've been invited to, because we think not only about the present and plan, but then also correcting. We're historically based projects, so we also think about correcting what has happened before. So I will say, I don't think we make any secrets about that, about keeping that top of mind.
I think one of the nice things about having something that can act as an anchor that's not just a house. there's this idea of building a neighborhood, but then there's also the other side of that is building a community. And building a community has a lot to do, yes, with the people, but the spaces where these people can gather. And so we look forward to being able to be in a space that as that neighborhood evolves, the people who are residents and who seek to become or remain residents, they can utilize this space to gather, to talk, and to strategize, quite honestly. And then we also have the opportunity to utilize our voice as two Black women who are property owners within this space. We now have the opportunity to leverage that to help influence decision-making, which we know is extremely important, especially as those developments, those market rate developments attempt to creep their way onto the other side or into the rest of Jackson Ward. What level of impact will that have? We want to make sure that people understand the damage that has been done, and we don't want to give people the opportunity to revisit that damage on a new generation of people. And then 150 years from now, when we're still talking about Jackson Ward, we're having the same conversations. So how can Jackson be used as a vehicle to help break the cycle? We're not putting that much power on ourselves, but we think that we're a drop in that bucket. And so we think, so that's kind of the way we will see ourselves here. We understand the need for housing. We don't push back against that, but we also know that the people who live in those homes need a place to go. And they need experiences, and experiences that are reflections of their own self, that allow them to learn and to kind of build on something. And we hope that the Skipwith-Roper Manor can be just that.
Yeah, a community space they can tap into. And even, I never even thought about that. Thank you for that question, because I think above anything, this is an architectural reminder to make sure that we have like a moral compass, that we are stewards of this space. Use the Skipwith-Roper Cottage as a reminder when we have developers coming in about the long-term implications of some of these decisions. I appreciate your question.
North Star. It can be a North Star.
Yeah, it could be a North Star of what to do and what not to do. So thank you for that. We're about to add that to our materials. We appreciate you because it's important.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you. I am going to be the timekeeper now and ask that we talk about our next step. And I'm going to really lean to staff to give us some direction on that, because a couple of things we heard about wanting to get perhaps some more community input into this process, and then possibly also the CAP having another conversation. Helen, thank you for your comment, because I think it's right on target. I mean, if you haven't seen it, it is awesome and amazing, and it is our obligation to make this land available to you for the purposes that you have said. We're about social justice and racial equity, and there's an opportunity for that. But before anything is final done, we don't like to rush anything. I'm going to defer Julia some possible next steps, and then we'll bring this meeting to a close and let you know when our next meeting is as far as the CAP is concerned.
Sure. Well, I guess I generally defer to the CAP for next steps that they'd like to see to move their decision making forward. So I don't know if any CAP members want to drop, bullet points in the chat as far as that's concerned. I think from my perspective, a clear next step is to link up with Miss Allen from the Historic Jackson Ward Association, but I also kind of think that conversation will probably need to include the Jackson Project as well. So right now, this is sort of a liminal space for the land bank staff. We definitely as staff support this proposal, and I've seen some comments about getting site planning a little bit more hammered out before maybe the development agreement is transferred, and I support that idea as well. I think that it sounds like the Jackson Project is committed to involving the community. So I think I'd be curious to hear from CAP members or even members here tonight who've talked about that, whether they would like that type of engagement to happen before the property is transferred and before a decision is made. Because I think that it could be kind of effective sort of on either side. And I also wanted to mention that we have as the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, we've run this proposal by our board ahead of time, because this is actually a really unique opportunity for us in that our namesake, Maggie Walker, owned several rental properties in this very neighborhood. Not the same properties that we own, but they're on the same block that the Jackson Project is proposing to acquire lots from. And for that reason, we really feel that this project has a lot of, is a chance for us to pay homage to, our namesake as well. And also to really do right by our mission for racial and historic justice as it relates to land use decisions in the city of Richmond. And so we as staff and board are proposing that we actually, if and when we do transfer these properties, we're proposing that it's actually via donation to the Jackson Project to support their work most fully and to really show that we have a commitment to this project's success too. So I guess my next steps would be linking up with Historic Jackson Ward Association, as well as the Jackson Project for deeper engagement opportunities. And then I think talking through maybe a more detailed site plan will be important as well.
Thank you. And Phil, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Again, just to cap it off, I think this is all amazing and a wonderful opportunity. I think I definitely hear the need or the desire for additional community engagement. From my perspective, it seems like that will be a continuing process as the rest of the plans come together and this capital campaign that's about to launch. And so I really see that in the hands of the Jackson Project and the Moon Sisters going forward. As a CAP member, I think I agree with staff's recommendation to transfer the lots, or at least execute an option to transfer. So that way we can at least lock that in for the Jackson Project to actually acquire that when y'all are ready to just take that property down and start being an ownership of the maintenance and the existing structures, things like that, insurance, all that stuff that gets in the weeds. I certainly back the donation, the full-on donation, with the caveat of having a right of first refusal for the land trust or land bank. So I feel ready to move forward as a CAP member to execute this project, and let's keep it moving forward. Let's get to 2026. There's a lot of work to get between here and then. But from the application and list of partners, there's a lot of force behind this, a lot of power, and a lot of power to be realized. So I feel good about it.
Thank you.
I'm with Phil. Sorry, I'm with Phil on that. I just want to talk a little bit through the, so they won't have a ground lease, but staff has proposed a right of first refusal, like Phil said. Can you just clarify that, and then I can make my decision on that? But I think I'm with Phil on, if we offer the first right of refusal, then I'm on board to go.
Julia, would you clarify that stipulation?
Yes, a right of first refusal is a clause in a development agreement that would essentially require the owner of a lot to notify the former seller of the lot. So in this case, the Jackson Project, as a new owner of the lot, would be required to notify the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust if they ever have the intention to sell the property on the open market. Generally, right of first refusal clauses also include some guidance about the buyback price. So essentially, this would just be, I really believe that, I think we support this project so strongly because I think that it's important for a Black-led organization to take ownership of these properties and stewardship of this neighborhood in general. And I don't see, I think that there'll be really positive and successful impacts from this project. And the right of first refusal would essentially just be a worst case scenario clause that would enable us to have another community conversation like this, because it would essentially just keep the community land trust and land bank in the loop, as someone as a stakeholder of these sites, so that in the future, should the Jackson Project ever decide to sell one or any of the lots that they're proposing to acquire, we'd be able to maybe have a hand in that lot's future. And I don't necessarily envision that happening. So that's
okay. So they want to own the land. They don't want the ground lease, but this kind of covers it should, okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Cab member, I'm good.
I was going to say, I'm seeing head shake and I'm hearing voices. So that's the decision. We agree with the recommendation. It is an honor and a privilege to partner up with you to make this happen. And we're just grateful that we are in this space and able to do so. So more conversation will ensue as far as the details of that agreement. And we know we'll be updated on that. I am just going to say to all of you now, both CAP members as well as fellow citizens, thank you so much for your presence, for your attendance. I think Flora has one announcement to make before we officially end this meeting. So Flora, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Community Land Trust is going to be hosting another community conversation webinar on the 17th, which is a Thursday at noon, where we are going to be talking about the history of CLTs and land justice and racial equity and our role in the community, and also going to be watching or we're going to have a community viewing of a documentary called Arc of Justice, which is the history of the country's first CLT. And so there is more information about that on our website, MaggieWalkerCLT.org. And there will be email announcements going out tomorrow, as well as social media posts and everything. So keep an eye out for that.
Thank you so much, Flora. Can I just add that it would also be followed by a community conversation? Well, that's the whole event, it's a conversation. But I wanted to lift up that Seisha and Anjali would also be a part of that community conversation. And I really look forward to hearing their perspectives and voices being reflected in that conversation. So join us. It's a virtual live stream. Well, it will be live streamed on the YouTube and it will be on Zoom. And if you want to be a part of that experience, then please register. Flora did a wonderful job getting the link on our website, getting all the details up there. And you could also check out the bios of the speakers who will be engaging in that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, thank each and every one of you. Continue to stay safe and be well.
Well, if can we just say thank you before we drop the line? I don't know that I expected to walk away with this. So from today's meeting. So, thank you all so much for just your overwhelming support and trust in the work that we've done and that we intend to do. We appreciate this beyond words. We look forward to continuing to engage with community and to have them help inform this process. Dante, I don't know if there is, I know there's the Historic Jackson Ward Association. I don't know if there are other neighborhood associations that represent the wider swath of Jackson Ward, but if so, we'd like to learn about that. That might be like a really succinct way to help make those connections on that side. But thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo, but I'm very emotional right now. Skipwith has become our anchor and ancestor, and doing right by him means a lot to us. And so to see not only this pass in this way, but to see so many people like Sheba or Michael Paul or Rashida or Melody and Historic Richmond, so many people have been partners of this work, Historic Jackson Ward Association, show up today.
Brother Flowers.
Yeah, Brother Flowers, we just appreciate you guys for letting us do this work over the last year. I'm a crybaby in general, but this moment really, y'all got me kind of choked up. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll give
Ms.
y'all
Creighton,
one
thank
thing
you for your leadership.
because I know we way over. Since the real Richmond history curriculum is probably divisive and will be reported to the governor's line, I just want to say that Black History Month has been made for me today. So I really appreciate everything that you all have been doing over the past year. You know, I'm a history nerd, and Dr. Moon and I were on the Department of Criminal Justice Services task force together, and things were rolling from there. So I was quiet today, but I really appreciate this. I wanted, other people to have the space for this, but we have kicked off Black History Month the correct way. And I look forward to all the progress and everything that comes from this. And I'm always here to help however I can. Ladies, thank you.
Great job.
Thank you all.
Great job, everyone.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you.